Good evening and welcome on a Wednesday night, the last Wednesday of 2022. I'm sorry, it was very creepy. My name is JW
Yeah,
Colwell.
where was that
I,
2 months ago for
weird.
Halloween?
It was weird. I don't know. It was weird. Weird brand things going on. Hold on. Anyway, my name is JW Colwell. Joining me tonight, as always, is my partner in crime, the estimable Rich Drees of Film Buff Online. Rich, how are you doing? I'm pumped full of antibiotics. How are you?
I'm glad to see you're at least looking marginally better. I know last week when we had to postpone, you were very much under the weather because I talked to you on the phone and you, no offense, you did not sound your usual chipper self.
No,
Um,
chipper was not a word I would use last week at all.
except maybe,
Um,
please feed me into a wood chipper and
yes, put
this.
me into a Fargo style wood chipper.
Bingo.
It was a terrible week. Like it was a terrible week. It was also terrible with regards to healthcare and just how. So we have all kinds of free healthcare where we can get doctor's appointments online, and we had all kinds of I had kinds of trouble negotiating that system. And I like to think I'm a moderately smart person. Couldn't figure it out, Rich, and it was like I eventually called my regular doctor and said, "Can you get me in?" They're like, "Yeah, we have a spot available tomorrow." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And lots of
Mhm.
antibiotics later, we're still dealing with stuff, but not nearly as bad as it was. But it was harrowing for about 3 days. I woke up on
Yeah.
Sunday watching the World Cup, trying to watch the World Cup, and just I found myself doing a zombie leap forward every time there was a loud sound on television, and then falling back into a kind of a drowsy slumber of illness. Anyway, uh, last
But
show of 2022, and we have
yes,
very
can
big
you believe
plans for.
we've done
Yeah,
26 of these already? This is our 27th episode.
we're knee deep in this. We're knee deep in Generation Movie right now.
We are knee deep
It's
in
it's
the
yeah, we're
1982
deep. We're deep. I don't know. But here's the thing. I feel like we're having a good time doing the show. I feel like people like the show. We would love more people to like it. If you have friends that want to
film.
watch it, by all means, let them know about us. And
Um, if
we're
you
gonna
go
change.
and if you go to the Indie Escape Network YouTube page, there's a whole playlist of all 26 episodes, so you can catch up, scroll through, find movies that you
Find
like
stuff
and
you
want to
might
hear what we
want,
have to say.
and I would also
Find some
say
movies you've never heard of,
find
and check
movies
out.
you never heard. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Find something you don't like, and maybe you'll be encouraged. Like the movie, I think everybody like we watched An Officer and a Gentleman. Had no idea how much money that movie made. Like, and I grew up in the '80s, and I had no idea how much that movie that money made. But and it's whether or not it's a good movie is decidedly up to whoever's watching it. But tonight we have the second highest grossing film of 1982 by a wide margin.
Our second Charles Durning film.
Our second Charles Durning film, yes.
Mhm.
Also, you know, in a year of, it's also our second. Uh, it's not necessarily as serious as Garp, but we have an actor that's portraying a female on screen.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a trend. Let's say hi to people who are here, and we'll get to the proverbial stuff. Joe Ridgely, good evening. Hope you're feeling better, JW. Thank you, Joe. I
Joe.
clearly am. Rich was one of the only people that talked to me last week, and I sounded like complete garbage, hot New York
It's
City
like they
garbage
say,
last week.
you sounded like Brenda Vaccaro after she smoked a carton of Lucky cigarettes. I was like,
Yes,
really bad.
Brenda Vaccaro and Supergirl. Bad, just bad. Good evening, Ken McKernan. Again, glad you're on Facebook and you haven't been thrown off. We appreciate you. Um, one of the things that we do love about where we're at and what we're doing and who we're working with is the great people at the Indie Escape Network. And there we go. If you enjoy this show, if you enjoy watching Rich and I every week, if you enjoy the ability to go back and watch all of our episodes, all 27 of them after tonight, YouTube channel on the Indie Escape Network. We also have a Facebook page on the Indie Escape Network. By all means, pitch in, get ready on that. we have a lot of very talented people on the Indie Escape Network that are only going to get more revered as we grow bigger. And and we have a big 2023 plan. Joe Ridgely is working very hard behind the scenes on a great many things, like Indie Escape Network being, involved with certain cons on the Eastern Seaboard. So we should have a lot of interesting, fun things going on with more. And my resolution is to be more in line with Joe and doing some of these things and interviewing people and getting to all these events and working hard with everybody in the network to make the network sturdier and get more interviews and get more people in. But our show is about taking a look at a movie that you may have not seen or may have seen, a classic or a non-classic, but stuff that involves looking at movies and how they're made. And I can't thank Rich enough for joining me on this journey. 27 episodes is a lot of work that you and I bust our humps to make sure that people, have a good knowledge of how these movies get made. And a lot of it is finding the happy accidents that happen. You and I have looked at 1982 pretty extensively in the last 27 episodes. We're going to move on to other things.
Yeah.
But I want to say the trends that we noticed in 1982, really interesting with how you look at how theaters were run, how you look at how movies were made and how movies kind of like the synergy between actors and movies and getting everything going through is very important. And that's one of the things that's going to be talked about a lot tonight, because one actor kind of took everything and, I don't want to say stole an idea, but I also don't want to say he didn't completely put himself in charge of it either. So we're going to talk about that in a moment with regards to production. But the movie...
And and I've been enjoying this. I mean, I lived this movie year, as did you. And I don't think I've ever gone back and really looked at it in this kind of detail before. And God knows we could have done 52 weeks. If we had started this on like January, we could have gone through and done 52 movies.
And we did miss we did miss some movies that are definitely things that need to be talked about. One of them I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight because it's really funny. Again, we're talking about a cross-dressing year, or a year where there's women playing actors playing men. The movie that I think Tootsie's most in line with is a movie called Victor Victoria that we didn't talk about. True. That is one of the absolute very best of these movies, with a very liberal stringing through it. Love who you love, and that was very early in '82 for a theme like that to become cogent. And Tootsie, the movie we're talking about tonight, which I guess we should talk about. Tootsie is another movie where you're talking about a very healthy line of feminism that's running through this very male-centric movie, and it's actually one of the great strengths of it. It's also where you also find like psychological looks at this particular syndrome called Tootsie syndrome, where that's evolved over time. That's an actual real thing that I was reading about today. And so it's a great movie. And I'm going to throw this out there to you, Rich. And before we even get going, go ahead.
Could you leave? Once again, I'm going to interrupt you really quickly. Could you pull the poster back up for a second?
Yeah.
Because I want to take a look at that log line. What do you get when you cross a hopelessly straight, starving actor with a dynamite red sequin dress? Hopelessly straight. I think I just want to keep that little bit of phrasing and how this movie is being marketed when we get into our critique of it a little bit later.
Well, and actually, the great thing about the movie, when we do critique it a little bit later, the great thing about a movie, the hopelessly straight thing, is not just the men in the movie. There's a sequence where there is a woman character that is hopelessly straight, with a woman in front of her that actually is probably better than any man that she's ever dated. And yeah, I'm talking about a specific scene in the movie. We'll get there. I know,
yes. But yeah, it was something I just noted now. I was like, wait a minute, I know we're going to talk about this. Let's
Oh,
kind
it's
of flag.
well, and it's definitely you know, you get America's Greatest Actress is the second thing. But so let's start where every one of our comments starts and every one of our shows start. We always try to look for the messy and try to figure out how something got where it got. So we start with production. I think this is one of the more interesting productions, right? Where it's and it's very the way I would describe it, and I don't know if you agree, Rich, but the way I would describe it is very actor centric because this is Hoffman kind of taking control and maybe taking a script that was kind of like floundering about Hollywood a little bit on the fringes and basically coming out of a movie called Kramer versus Kramer where he's deathly serious about, you know, the female and male roles in the house, in the home. The idea of a father having to be both mother and father, because that's very, very cognizant in that movie. And he happens upon a script. It's called "Would I Lie to You" is the name of the script, and it's made by Charles Evans, who happens to be the sibling of one of the greatest movie producers in the history of Hollywood, Robert Evans.
Robert Evans.
So Robert Evans, yeah, Robert Evans is fantastic. Everything about Robert Evans and his career and everything, you know, the kid stays in the picture is one of the greatest documentaries ever. But this is his brother who's coming over from the fashion industry, basically trying to not imitate, but trying to. He's seeing his brother having so much fun, basically coming in because, you know, I love movies and I'm bored and, you know, I want to see what I can do. So he writes this script. Or no, actually, Don McGuire had written a play, and then they come up with, you know, all different things for this. It gets attention of various actors, including Buddy Hackett, which made me laugh out loud, like, because he wanted to play the talent agent, which is kind of Hackett doesn't want to play the lead; he wants to play the agent because that's where he's at.
Well, that would definitely have been a very different tone for a movie because I think Buddy Hackett, of course, brings
a zany quality to him.
Vibe. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things that when you read about the production, the direction. Sidney Pollack is the director, and the direction that he basically gave every single actor working on this movie is, I want everything played serious. You may be in the silliest situation you've ever been in, but everything has to be played serious. Everything has to be played for drama. And when I read that, I was like, that is exactly how the movie plays. There are funny situations and you laugh at them, but everybody that's living the situation is in the moment, and there is nary a, you know, I'm pissing in the sink, man. I almost pissed in the sink. Like, you know, just the reverberations about it are so serious and so real that the comedy comes from the very improv way of going, be serious. The more serious you are, the funnier the situation is going to be.
Yeah. Now the scripts, you know, before they even started rolling, I mean, there was rewrites going on while shooting was happening, but the script itself, as we mentioned, had gone through a number of people. I think by the time Pollack got his hands on it, he was still having like some people come in and do some polishes initially to kind of form the main structure of what we see here. He was working with Larry Gelbart, best known perhaps as, you know, the creator of the TV version of MASH, and kind of oversaw that show for a good chunk of its run, and just created, you know, a television classic there. And he, Gelbart, and Hoffman were kind of working on that. Some other people came in. She doesn't get any credit, and it's a damn shame. But Elaine May,
other people. I love the other people line because other people are probably one of the greatest female comedians in the history of.
Well,
actually,
yes.
You know, let's not even say female. Greatest comedians in the history of the business.
Yes, Elaine May's a genius, and She did a couple of drafts on this. She basically created like the Terry Garr character and the roommate character, for this film, and a couple of key scenes. Why she did not get the credit she deserves is a matter of the Writers Guild arbitration. I'm sure this movie was actually held up because so many writers had worked on it and wanted all to get their little
the cut
bit
of it.
from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
well, and that's the thing. The polishes. It's really funny. You only hear about what writer came up with what thing if you're watching some of the Criterion documentaries or watching some of the extras that there's a documentary that's floating around about the background of Tootsie, where Pollack basically comes clean on exactly what Elaine May came up with. Obviously the roommate character and all these other things. And it's just one of those things where it's so many cooks in the pot, but the pot ends up being the best stew imaginable.
True.
Like it becomes.
And I'm sorry, I did want to, before we drift too far away from Elaine May, I did want to point out, okay, Elaine May got her start in Chicago as one of the founding members of the Compass Theater. Compass Theater was the first improv theater, period. Amen. Full stop. They were the first people to do nightly improv shows and, build and work off of character and audience ideas and things like that. And ultimately, that's where she met Mike Nichols, who, became her partner. They went off to New York City to do their thing, ultimately, in movies. One of the other members of the Compass Players, Del Close, who is considered like the father of improv.
It's funny. You got a call as it happened. The father and Del Close. And anytime Del Close gets mentioned,
yes.
For folks who are looking, by the way, Del Close can be found in a series of places, and I would argue one of the more interesting ones. If you watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off, he's one of the teachers, and if you look at the board, if you've taken any improv classes or you know anything about improv, the board is all improv stuff. He's an English teacher. He's talking about cages and chains. Everything on the board is improv. He's also he is the priest at the end of the Blob remake who has little baby Blob. So he's the wacky preacher from the Blob remake from the 80s.
There's also a really great documentary from about 2 or 3 years ago now on Del Close. I would recommend if you're interested in the history of comedy. He's one of those cornerstone guys because he comes out of Compass Players. He goes on to found the Second City Theater in Chicago, which becomes has that spin-off up in Toronto, and that's where we get all those great sitcom and comedic actors out of
SCTV.
Canada. All the SCTV crowd and all that. But in Second City, it also was pretty much a birthing place for a lot of the people who went on to do National Lampoon's Radio Hour,
Saturday
Night Live, including one Bill Murray. So Elaine May writes and creates the character that Bill Murray will ultimately play because they're all part of that same continual comedy.
It could be argued he's the best character in the movie, by the way. Just so we're clear, Jeff, the playwright, is my favorite. One of my favorite characters. And when we had an improv group called I Miss Trevor, I wrote with my good friend Ren Schmidt. I wrote a sketch about the necktie. So it was. So I'll tip one out for Ren, but basically we wrote an entire sketch about the necktie. Without the necktie and with the necktie. So the idea, there's a sequence in the movie where he's talking about, I rewrote the necktie scene without the necktie. And I think Hoffman's response is, your whole problem with your play is the necktie scene. So I once wrote a sketch that was all about a guy getting a necktie at a job interview. Anyway, that's how much I love this movie. So I even write sketch comedy about it.
And I would argue that Bill Murray is doing his first real good acting here.
Yes,
But we'll get
it's
to that. We'll get to that.
well,
But
it's
yes,
it's also the first.
lots
He's
of rewrites.
uncredited. It's the first time he's like he's not. It's one of the first and only times Bill Murray after this point will ever have to not carry a movie again. So it's
Yeah.
he's literally just showing up and eating scenery.
Yeah. Another writer who went uncredited on this is Robert Kaufman. He wrote Love at First Bite, Divorce American Style, Freebie and the Bean. He got to start working on the Monkeys TV series. I looked around. I cannot find readily on the internet early drafts of Tootsie, and
I think there's a reason for that. Well, and I think that's the story of the production. The story of the production is that it starts off as a play, it gets picked up, it gets bought up, and then as it flounders in Hollywood a little bit, and as it gets progresses through, it gets polished and spit shined by every known man. It gets passed around from director to director. It gets fought over by studios until the point where Hoffman comes on and just kind of buys it up and develops it for himself, right? And basically gets full complete creative control with the idea that Charles Evans gets to become a producer, right? The role itself, before Hoffman got anywhere near it, Peter Sellers, obviously, Michael Caine. I can easily see in my mind's eye a great Peter Sellers comedy. I could easily see in my mind's eye a Michael Caine comedy. They are two totally different comedies from what we would get, right? Also, the directing. There's a little bit of directing problems here and there. Basically, the first director that was on, Dick Richards, steps away over creative differences. He becomes a producer. This movie has like 12 producers. It has a bunch of writers. None of them, like a lot of them, not credited. Hal Ashby. Hal Ashby comes on as a director. Yeah, no, that's perfect. But he had legal action with a movie called Looking to Get Out, where Columbia forced him out. And then Sidney Pollack finally comes on, and he becomes on as director and producer, another producer. So you're looking at all of these pieces that come into place, and it's one of those things where it's bouncy, it bounces around, it goes from here to there, it gets kind of homogenized and turned into a Dustin Hoffman vehicle at the behest of Dustin Hoffman, and who basically had people out fielding, like once Kramer versus Kramer hit and all these movies hit for him, he basically had people out farming for Dustin Hoffman projects, and this is one of the ones where he hits pay dirt. He comes in and he takes complete creative control because it was bouncing around so much, and Evans just wanted to be part of the fun that his brother was in. So it's, yes, you can do whatever you want, Mr. Hoffman, as long as I'm a producer. And that's like everybody on this movie is a producer or a writer, and the writers don't get as much credit. And it's just, it's it's an interesting production.
And Chris Evans' brother, Robert Evans, was certainly having his fun, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, that or Ally McGraw, whatever you want to go with. For a brief period until Steve McQueen.
As I was rewatching this, was this went through so many things, so many writers, and so many edges were probably polished off and new things were added on, and this could have been a real mess. But the film feels still very spontaneous, feels very lively. Part of that is because they're playing it as drama and letting the comedy come from that. But also, Sidney Pollack knew when to let his actors improv and play in a scene. I mean, he comes from the school of acting himself. He studied Meisner, and so there are scenes like when Michael as Dorothy meets up with Sidney Pollack as his agent at the Russian room, and they go inside, they sit down, and Dustin Hoffman basically gooses him at one point, and then they're going back and forth a little bit. A lot of that wasn't scripted. That was just Hoffman in the moment being playful and playing within the scene. The bit at the party, anything Bill Murray says at the party, improv. the bit with Terry Garr
Yeah.
coming out of the bathroom.
I want 9 people who came out of the worst rainstorm ever.
Yes.
Who come out after the play and said, "I saw your play. What was it about?
What happened?
Yeah, what happened?"
Yeah.
And so it's got great bits like that, but the production side of it is, again, one of those really interesting stories where it kind of just finds life. Now, I also found really interesting. Hoffman took the role very seriously, dead seriously, enough to go and visit the set of General Hospital. And basically come in and talk to the women he was working with that were working on General Hospital. Watching all these different things, and the seriousness, the single most interesting thing, Pollack telling everybody, yeah, it's a comedy, but it's not. So whatever you're thinking or whatever you're doing, don't play it for laughs. It's got to be played deathly serious with a ton of things happening. I had a 60-year-old man ask me to marry him. What'd you say? What'd you say? I told him I had to think about it. What are you going to do? I don't know. I need to get out of this contract. It's one of those movies where it is eminently quotable. It is also, the slapstick nature of it is so, and I know you're in the same boat. It is so reminiscent of the 30s, 40s screwball comedies like His Girl Friday, and also, so it's very reverent towards them, and it's also just got all these bits and pieces where people are talking so fast that it's just a mile a minute, and you have to go back and rewind scenes to make sure you get the jokes. Some of the jokes are so that when they land, like Terry Garr getting stuck in the bathroom is one of those scenes you don't really pay attention to it the first time it happens, but it is Sandy in a nutshell. It's the Sandy character in a nutshell. I've been trapped in the bathroom. Did nobody hear me? I've been in there for a half hour. She misses the entire party. And then she comes out and nobody knew she was even in the bathroom. And the first couple times you watch the movie, you may not notice it, but she's got a plunger in her hand. She's fighting the door. And then everybody's kind of like, no, didn't even notice you were gone. And it's her character in a nutshell. Everybody in this movie, the casting, that's another thing that has to be talked production-wise. The other casting, the idea that Hoffman at some point talked Pollack into coming out of retirement. He hadn't acted in 20 years. And he said, "You're perfect to play Fields, my agent. You're perfect." And the role was originally slated for Dabney Coleman. Dabney Coleman came in, killed the audition, but Dabney Coleman was good as the agent. But Hoffman's like, "Pollack's you got to be the agent. I need to be able to play off you in some of these scenes." And so they eventually gave Dabney Coleman the chauvinist director of the soap opera, and he ends up knocking it out of the park. He's so good, he gets 3 television shows out of it. You know what I mean? Like,
true. And Coleman's just fantastic. Period.
Dabney Coleman's great. Everybody in the movie's great. Everybody has a moment too. Everybody has
one of his first big roles. He did 9 to 5 earlier in the year, and then this.
Well, 9 to 5 is 80. 9 to 5 is 1980.
That's right. I'm sorry.
And he did this, and then he had a couple other movies, and then he eventually found his footing really well in like really great but short-lived television series, like Buffalo Bill,
where he reteamed with Gina Davis.
Yes. So again, part of my legacy portion. I don't know about you. But anyway, but that's the thing. Everybody gets moments. Charles Durning gets great moments. Hoffman, of course, gets great moments. Jessica Lange, who would be nominated 2 times for acting awards in the same year, very rare. She's nominated for Frances Farmer in the movie Frances, and she's nominated for this character, and wins an Academy Award for this acting role. One of the only wins in 10 nominations for this movie. Everybody gets a moment in this script. George Gaines, classically trained comedy actor, gets great moments as the patriarch of the hospital actor, who's like a little gropey. And it just everybody gets moments, and that's one of the things. Um, let's couple comments from Peanut Gallery folks we like a lot. Kathy Fraser, Victor Victoria was an amazing movie. Yes.
Yes.
This and Victor Victoria would make a great double bill. Thank you, Kathy, for chiming in. How about this one? David Madison, star of uh, the End of the Night podcast on our radio network, laying in the bed in the Christmas Story house watching you guys. Thank you, David, for
Wow.
That's impressive. This holiday week, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That is some next level nerddom, and I salute you, sir. Wonderful.
It's next level nerddom that we're a part of, which is nice.
Yes. Thank you for including us in your stay there.
Production happens. There's
there's a couple of other smaller parts there too. I want to point out. The floor manager character, Joe, that's Lynn Thigpen, who I think most people remember as the thief from Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego.
Yes.
From the kids show. And she had a great, career outside of that show. The producer's assistant, who barely has any lines, you can mostly see her at like the audition in the lobby of this the production studio. That's Ellen Foley. She, of course, sang opposite Meatloaf on Paradise by the Dashboard Light, and she played the public defender in the second season of Night Court. Didn't work out, and ultimately she would be replaced by Marky Post in season 3. But it was interesting to see her here. And one of the party guests, one of the actresses that Dustin Hoffman hits on is Christine Ebersol, who was just coming off of a year or two on Saturday Night Live, and she's also married to Dick Ebersol, who was at the time the producer of Saturday Night Live. It was during
producer of everything NBC, really.
It was a big kind of NBC kind of thing there.
But yeah, I
mean,
the casting
vibe that this show, that the soap opera they were on, was a CBS show for some reason. I have no reason to back that up whatsoever with any facts or anything.
It's weird.
It's like it was on CBS. Sure it was.
But it's one of those things about the production. You get the interesting side stories are Hoffman kind of coming into his own, buying up chunks of real estate everywhere you can get with regards to properties. You have Pollack coming out of retirement, acting wise to star in it, but also produce and direct. And the tidbits he gives the direction is great. You have the script that's kind of polished and just honed by so many great comedic minds that you can't get enough of it. And so many different things where it went to thing. They film, some on location in New York. They film at the famed National Video Studios in New York City, Bloomingdale's, near Bloomingdale's in Central Park. They also film at the Russian Tea Room, which is a scene we talked about early. And it just becomes one of those. It's not necessarily a quintessential New York movie, but the New York locations are essential to the verisimilitude that this movie creates, right?
New York isn't necessarily a character here, but it
certainly helps.
Close. It certainly lends to the vibe. Also, with the verisimilitude here, for like that one montage of Dorothy Michaels' kind of quick rise to fame, we see her in a photo shoot with Andy Warhol.
And Gene Shalit. Don't forget Gene Shalit.
They actually shot. Okay, we see a couple of pictures of her being interviewed by Gene Shalit. They actually shot like a 5-minute interview that they wound up not using in the movie, but it's on the Criterion DVD and Blu-ray.
Fantastic. So, gets a date with Gene Shalit.
Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, it hits on Gene Shalit. It's a really great little thing to look like trying to find.
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy. It's a little out of focus, but overall, it's a fun piece of video to watch.
So production goes well.
Mm.
Columbia doesn't know exactly what it has on its hands. But as we jump into the box office side of things, so this movie, as we said at the top of the show, this movie becomes the second highest graded, the second highest rated film of 1982. That means it's only behind one movie, and that movie is E.T. That movie played for a year and a half. And so just to give you an idea of the numbers, to give you an idea of like the stacked 82 deck that we're dealing with, second in 82 is like it would be first or second in many years from 2000 on, right? Where we're talking about numbers, we're talking about how it opens, how it plays out. And one of the things that you're going to see here is it ends up grossing, Rich, it ends up grossing an astronomical $177 million, which, today is adjusted for inflation is $524 million, so $500 million.
Mhm.
Its opening weekend is $5.5 million, which is roughly 3% of the opening of the total gross of the film. It lasts on average 15 weeks. It starts out in 943 theaters. It ends up in a max of 1,200 theaters at any given point. It plays roughly 24 weeks in any theater it plays in. The numbers are astounding. 23 weeks in 82. That's forever. That's a long. It's just. It's an amazing statistic. The budget of the movie, by the way, is only $15 million.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. I saw a budget of about 21 million, which would have been in 2022 dollars about 65 million.
okay,
Now, 60
either
million
one.
invest. Yeah. So let's take the highball number, 65 million. 12, 13. You probably had to clear about 150 million to turn a profit on this movie.
But
And
if you're
it
talking
made
about 65 million and you're $500 million is basically, if you're looking at the 65, but if you're looking at 21, it's 177, which is again mind-boggling how great it did. And again, when we talk about the box office on our show, when we talk about the in 82, and as we leap off of 82 and go into various different directions that we're going to go into in 2023, the idea of when a movie is playing, where a movie's playing, how it's playing is you had to hold screens. It's not like we're talking about Avatar: The Way of Water or talking about, Wakanda Forever, where they get 5,000 screens right off the top, and they get 3 or 4 weeks to make as much money as they possibly can, and then they're on to the next phase of whatever they're going to do, either Disney Plus or whatever's going to happen. Okay. But the interesting thing here is it played on a lot of these screens are 1 and 2 theaters, 1 and 2 theater houses, movie theaters that have 1 or 2 screens. Played for one of those screens for 23 weeks, from the middle of December all the way through the middle of 1983. And it's just one of those things where you sit back and a simpler time, but also a really interesting time where you actually had to be a really good movie. It couldn't, it's not, I'm not saying they don't make good movies today. I'm just saying that in order to hold on to and to generate box office, movies had to last forever, Rich. They had to.
Oh yeah, they had to have those legs.
Legs is what the old timers like you and I call them. But they also had to be good. They had to be worthwhile to be able to. It starts at 5.5 and it grosses 177 million. It also grosses another. I think the estimate I read was another 60 million worldwide. So we're talking like it ends up hitting all over the place. Wait, hold on. What was it? 64 million internationally. So you're talking in 1982 dollars, it grossed over $200 million. So about 241, and they think it's sold about 56.9 million tickets. After 115 days in theater, Rich, it passes Close Encounters of the Third Kind as Columbia's highest-grossing film of all time. Which is that's not an easy task. And to think that, how long, 8 years? No, wait, what was it, 74 for Close Encounters? Talking about 8 years. Movie stood 74?
No. Close Encounters was 78, I want to say. 77?
78? Hold on.
I know, we're both like...
We have this thing called the internet, which is...
Never heard it. 77, yeah.
77, okay. So at 5 years, that's a long time for a movie to stay number one, right? I mean, it's a really astounding box office number when you look at it and you go, that's amazing. That's, it just...
And Tootsie would remain the highest grossing comedy for 2 years until Ghostbusters comes along.
Yes, and then, 84 is going to have two of the highest grossing comedies of all time. So it's like one of those things where it's like 84 is ripe with comedy. Summer and Christmas, boom, boom.
I dare say this is, kind of this is the definition of a high concept comedy.
Yeah, no. Well, and like I said, yeah, it's got its bearings in classic screwball comedies of the 30s and 40s. It's got its bearings in, gender comedies of the 60s, especially the Kaja Fo, right? And a couple of the other things. But how did people view it, though? Let's get right into that, and then you and I can talk about how we view it. So Rotten Tomatoes, where we start all our talks, it's at 90% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics with 52 reviews. It is at 81% with 50,000 ratings from people, which is high, but not nearly in line, almost in line with the critics. I think it's one of those movies where you and I have looked at it where it's definitely the kind of thing where you can see that it's not only a critical respondent movie, but it's also an audience crowd pleaser. It's the kind of movie where critics say, hey, this is really good, and audiences come across and go, you're right, this is actually really good. It doesn't happen all the time, Rich. We have a lot of time, and right now especially, we have a lot of movies that get great critical response, and then people are like, critics like it, I don't like them, and they immediately jump off. Did you find any reviews that you found really interesting? I found one or two.
Not really. I'm kind of zipping through Rotten Tomatoes right now. I wanted to see, 90 is a very strong, percentage of critics who would say,
10?
yes, I would recommend this film. Who are the other 10% though? I'm like, the first one I come to, the pull quote out of this, I found this polished sitcom comedy to be a drag.
That sounds like somebody trying to be funny, Rich. That sounds like somebody trying to be, they're funny.
And it doesn't look like it's a contemporary review. And that's what I think I'd be more interested in seeing is like, it's a review from 2008.
And it's interesting that they're calling it a polished sitcom comedy when I think I think the point of that review, without even reading it, just hearing the lame drag joke thing, what I would say is, for you and me, we watch a lot of sitcoms, we watch a lot of things. Isn't it heightened sitcom? Isn't it a heightened like it is sitcom situations, sitcom things where it's to the nth degree? Like it's raised to such a level where you're looking at it going, this could be any sitcom with somebody, bosom buddies, right? It could be that.
Yeah. Well, Bosom Buddies just went off the air like the previous March. It ran from the fall of 1980 to March of 82. Because I actually went back. I was like, wait, where does Bosom Buddies fall in the continuum of like 1980s drag comedy?
The Tootsie continuum.
Yes.
That's our book title, Rich.
Oh, there we go.
Where does it fall in the Tootsie continuum?
And it did kind of lead me to think, if Tootsie had come out. Okay, Tootsie comes out in December of 1982. By that point, everybody involved with Bosom Buddies had long gone on their separate ways. Any holds on their services in the contractual holds had long since lapsed. I wonder if like Tootsie had come out in the spring or the summer of 1982 and was as big
Bosom
a
Buddies hit.
would the network have reversed their decision and said, you know what, drag comedy is in, we're doing a third season of Bosom Buddies, you know? And what would that have done to Tom Hanks's career and everything else? It would have pushed them off
You
in
made
different
me
directions.
you made me go digging. So I did find one of the other. How about this review? I've never heard this person. He's from Asheville, North Carolina. I don't want to give him any name or anything. He writes possibly one of the top half dozen overrated films of all time. I'm just curious what his other half dozen films are that are overrated.
They're probably all really good too, and he's just a grump.
I see, overrated to me, I think like you can't have something overrated. It's properly rated. Like it's overrated in this particular case. But that's one of the negative reviews. Like the negative review, there's only like 4 or 5 of them that you can see, and they're all like one that does come about that is part and parcel of present day time is politics of film seem to be a little out of whack. Certainly something we can discuss for a moment. But the idea of Dustin Hoffman, I think the line that comes across for me in this movie when you're, I was better as what was it?
I was a better man as a woman with
than
you
I ever was as a man
with
by
any
myself
other
with any other woman. And I think that's the gist of the movie. The gist of the movie is this incredible awakening. Now, the interesting side note, again, when some of these reviews are had or done, is whether or not any of the real life stuff that Hoffman was accused of later, right, much later in his career in life, whether the way he was talking. Now, on one of the Criterion interviews, Hoffman talks about the idea that he never would have spoken to somebody who looked like Dorothy. And that, he feels like Dorothy would have ended unloved and unwed and never been a working actress. And I found it both sad and kind of contemplative, but also the movie is so good on so many levels at riffing on first acting, first soap operas. It riffs on so many different things and gets so many of them right, like playwrights. Every little side note, struggling actresses, struggling actors, the sleazeballs that
your job.
Yeah, sleazeballs taking advantage of actresses they work with. You know what I mean? It's essentially a Me Too movement a movie before the Me Too movement, right?
It's a movie about empathy, I think. Also, when you really look at what propels Michael's character arc is he literally steps into somebody else's shoes and lives their life and understands what they go through and realizes, no, that's wrong. And that's, it is summed up. It's kind of on the nose, but it is summed up in that line that we quoted just before, one of his last lines there in the movie. And I think that's what's really remarkable about this film. Like, in a drag comedy, like say Some Like It Hot, it's the drag is played for laughs, and that's it. Do our characters really learn anything? Does Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis really learn anything? Do they become better people? A little bit, but ultimately, it's because it doesn't feel like it's really a large character arc like we get here.
Yeah, and I think he has empathy for her, right? The actress that he's become. He there are great moments about there's a moment where he's eating cottage cheese with Bill Murray, and he's talking about trying to get a handbag and the fight over the handbag and how he doesn't understand how women does it. I don't know how women do it every day. I have no idea. The woman who got the purse I was going after, I know she did time. You know what I mean? and just this thing like, you know, I can't wear white to a casual dinner. You know what I mean? Like all these rules that women are going through, that women have to follow, that Michael kind of thinks. And when you say the empathy, I think you're right. The defining characteristic of the movie is empathy. But it's not just for women, it's also for somebody like the Charles Durning character, the West character, right? You know, this older gentleman who kind of falls for Dorothy, and asks her to marry him after his wife has passed away. There is an empathetic streak running through for that character. The idea that Michael has to lead this character astray, and just basically like the moment. One of my favorite moments is I had a 60-year-old man ask me to marry him. Well, what'd you say? I said I would think about it. It's very sweet, and it's all earned.
There are laughs within those scenes, but neither of the characters are held up to ridicule.
No.
You don't have one guy going, one guy being the butt of the joke because he doesn't recognize that the other person is actually a man in women's clothing and makeup.
Well, and it happens to two of them. It happens to both him and the George Gaines character, where they're both completely like, and even the George Gaines character, who's been completely fooled the entire movie. The suave, debonair doctor, the older doctor of the Southwest General soap opera. His line of empathy is, "Does Jeff know?" Like, because he thinks Jeff and Dorothy are dating, and Bill Murray, he like, so his big thing is like, I got fooled by it. What about Jeff, the character I've met once? So the empathy kind of seeps through all the characters, where they get to a point where they're just trying to figure things out, and they aren't necessarily good at figuring things out. The Jessica Lange character, who is one of the great female characters written, and the performance by Jessica Lange is phenomenal. She's dealing with a baby. She's dealing with being close to being an alcoholic, probably an alcoholic. She's dealing with she picks the wrong men all the time, and it's just and being a star. She's a star, right? So she's got all of these problems, and she has this one moment, like when we were talking about the thing about being. It's never the homosexuality in the film, or any of the things where characters have feelings for characters of the same sex, is never played for laugh because of that. It's always played for the laugh of the situation Michael has put himself in, because he was such an asshole as an actor. And I think that's one of, like, the acting things, like, the acting, the idea of a New York actor takes it on the chin in this movie so harshly, teaching classes, waiting tables, doing all the things they can to survive. And Michael gets so many auditions, so many roles. He has one role at the beginning where he definitely is going to play a major role, where he's asked to just, get up and walk across to deliver final monologue before his character dies. And he's like, he refuses to do it. And you're just like, you're such an asshole. Like, you're so, and he meets with George and says, "Are you trying to say nobody in New York wants to work with me?" No, you're limiting it. I'm saying nobody in Hollywood wants to work with you either. Like,
now, supposedly a lot of those audition rejections actually happened to Hoffman very early on, when he was a young struggling actor in the city. So it's nice to kind of, maybe for him to be just flipping the bird at those people who rejected him long ago, going, "I'm in a movie now, suck it."
I was in Kramer vs. Kramer, actor, Oscar nominated. Woo!
And I haven't watched Tootsie in a couple of years. And after hanging around with a lot of theater people for several years now, the one thing that struck me about the scene where he refuses to get up to walk to center stage to deliver his last dying monologue, for me was, well, just reblock the whole goddamn scene then. He doesn't have to die over here. Why don't you just make it so he's, kind of center stage to begin with, and you eliminate that problem. Just push him there earlier.
Yeah, but it's actors versus directors in that sequence. And actors sometimes don't win, and that's okay. But like
kind
I said, I think when you look at this movie, the other side of it that is amazing, and it's very much in line with the deeper, profound meaning. So it's a comedy about it parodies the acting in the 80s in New York. It parodies, almost perfectly parodies, soap operas that were running in the 80s. It almost perfectly parodies it perfectly hits on all of these different side things when they all gel together, and they eventually become this love story about a guy who falls in love with a woman while he's being dressed as a woman. You know, man falling in love with a woman and that's when when I was saying earlier, it kind of ties into Victor Victoria, because that's all about a man playing a woman playing a woman, a woman playing a man playing a woman, and so it's this the wackiness involved and the thing, but they're so nice to their characters. They never treat their characters disrespectfully, even to the most egregious character in the movie, the Terry Garr character, the Sandy character, who she has a willing knowledge of things, where she does get the role in Return to Love Canal, right? But it's not necessarily, she doesn't necessarily get paid back for all the things that have been done to her in the movie, but she definitely has her head on her shoulders, which she knows exactly what she is. And I that's the great thing. Everybody gets a moment. Bill Murray gets a lot of them, though. That's when you talk about Elaine May doing the polish on, like, Bill Murray holding court as a playwright at a drunken birthday party, just about as good as you're going to get. Also, he delivers the greatest line in the movie, which is, after the whole thing comes up, that is one nutty hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a perfect place to end the critique, and it's beautiful.
I would say, first of all, this is Bill Murray's earliest best serious straight acting, and I'm glad Sidney Pollack was like, no, we're playing this as drama, because
you're a struggling playwright.
He's a little bit bigger than life. In Meatballs, we're not going to take it speech. That's bigger than life. Stripes, he's bigger than life, and here he's a little bit more self-contained, and I think he's doing some great work.
We're going to take your nerd card away. It just doesn't matter. It's the speech.
What did I say?
The speech you said. I don't know what you said. All I'm going to say is I'm going to pretend I heard. It just doesn't matter, which is the Meatball speech.
If I was writing, I probably would have fact checked myself, but I'm just speaking off the top of my head.
It's okay. That's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'll never judge you about it. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, Rich. Move on.
I know.
Let's go.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter. But
it just doesn't matter.
Also, that line, that is one nutty hospital. They didn't know what he was going to say there. He improv that line, and only Bill Murray would use the term nutty. Everybody else would have said crazy, and I don't think it works as well. For some reason, nutty is funnier in that moment.
And he's pointing at the television when he's doing it. It's this weird, like, that is one nutty hospital. And it's just like...
But he has to point it out to other people in the room who aren't there.
Because he's a playwright, because that's what they do. But like I said, they hit everything. They hit the actor stuff. They hit the soap opera parody. They hit, the idea of the sexual dynamics between men and women, the idea that women are behind the eight ball, the idea that, somehow... so it's a wonderful, it's one of the best comedies ever written, and it's one of my favorite, absolute favorite movies of all time.
They also don't play any okay, there's jokes about, or there's in humorous situations where men almost kiss Dorothy, and in one case do kiss Dorothy. And they never play it as like gay panic, I don't think.
No, I think it does a really good job not doing that.
Yeah,
there are many cross-dressing comedies that will come out after this where it's nothing but panic, where it's and that's sad. The little bit that we lost some of the empathy that this movie kind of envelope, like. again, the line about the ring is he asked. I had a 60-year-old guy ask me to marry him, and he's like, well, "What do you say?" I don't know. I'm gonna think about it. Like it's just I told him I think about it. Like it's just it's off the roof. It's wonderful.
It's almost like Michael had keeps a certain amount of distance from Dorothy as the character he's playing, because at one point
But
he
he
said something
loves
I
her.
thought,
Like he loves her and wants what's best for her. It's this weird,
yes,
it's weird dynamic that, and eventually, what's best for her is not necessarily best for Michael, which
no,
is this weird dynamic that is
and
played expertly.
he says something earlier on. He goes, "I think she's smarter than me," which I was like, "Wow,
I
that
wish I
is
could.
really amazing."
I wish.
And
I wish I could make her prettier though. I wish I could. I wish I could do it for her. He has a whole thing where he's talking about trying to make her prettier so that she would get more. Like I don't. I think it's to get more attention. The idea that he wants her microphone enhanced, her loudspeaker enhanced. Um, okay, so let's talk about legacy and franchise viability. Biggest legacy. One of the things that's come out of this, they just did a musical. It's traveling the country right now. It was on Broadway. A very funny book. Everybody seems very happy with the musical. Great. It never produced a franchise or anything because this is a one shot story.
yeah,
But if you love any of the gender crossed '90s movies, uh, you know, um, she's the man, or like every time you look up and see a gender crossed movie, it has some sort of vibe. And what I would say the vibe that it's trying to be is I want to be as good as Tootsie, and a lot of them are not.
no. Now this is going to
Again,
surprise you, because I don't think its approach to the material is exactly the same tonal approach that Sidney Pollack and company took. But I would say one movie that I think is very good about doing the cross dressing, generating some empathy for its characters, because they're, again, walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, is Just One of the Guys with Joyce Heiser.
yeah, I think that's actually probably one of the best ones because that's one of the ones where, again, that's actually the it's the gender bending thing. I don't disagree with you. Actually, I think that's a very good thing. But the key to that movie is not the gender bending. It's the key to that movie is that she falls in love with a guy that's a little bit nerdy, right? She falls in love with the guy that likes James Brown and doesn't necessarily wear the best clothes to school. Isn't necessarily like there's a whole fashion rebuff for that guy. That is one of the legacy movies. I would also argue that some of the legacy um, comes across and actors kind of finding other places. Like we talked about earlier, Dabney Coleman plays such a hard ass, so great in this movie. He eventually gets a little typecast, right? And he ends up playing these hard ass characters and stuff like Buffalo Bill, which is one of the great sitcoms that where you look at it and you just look up and he's dominant and he's just brilliant in every sitcom he's ever done, but they're all short lived because nobody can wrap their head around a character that is this jerkish. And I think it's fantastic that it's one of those things like Dabney Coleman, where he looks at where the shows he did and the movies he did and just an amazing character actor that took a lot like the 9 to 5 role and this role and actually engendered them with a little bit more than what they deserved. You know what I mean? And in some ways kind of comes out of it and gets to do all these other shows where he's literally playing a typecast version of himself. But they're all interesting shows to me. They're all shows that I look at and I go, that's fun. That's great. That's a legacy for this movie where Dabney Coleman becomes something where it's totally noticeable, and something where it's totally like amazing. And
I
oh wait,
wish
hold on. Joe said just one of the guys. I was typing before Rich said it. Fair enough.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, we don't believe it, Joe. We don't buy it. We don't buy it. But yeah, I mean, any of the gender bending movies, you know, you look up and you realize, you know, all the legacy, everything is trying to be as good as this movie. Every single one of them. Where you look up and you go, you know, can it be, you know, this good? And in many cases they can't. Now, you know, things that we should talk about legacy. It is on. It's number 62 on the AFI 100 Years, 100 Movies. So it's in the top 100 movies of all time. It also made the 100 Years, 100 Laughs list, and also made the 100 Years, 100 Movies 10th anniversary list, but it dropped to 69 in 2007. And it is one of the guarded films for the film registry by the Library of Congress, which is a big deal because that means future generations will get a protected version of it.
Yes.
But I think the legacy and franchise viability also comes in how it's 40 years later, it's still one of the best of its kind. Like think about the gender bending comedies. You're looking at Some Like It Hot, Tootsie. I would argue Victor Victoria is in that range. And I think if you watch, if anybody who watches our show decides to somehow watch a Victor Victoria Tootsie double feature, not only are the characters empathetic, but all of the situations are funny as hell. Both movies are hilarious, and the performances, the supporting performances, strengthen the lead performances. Julie Andrews is fantastic in Victor Victoria's, as is James Garner, but Robert Preston steals the show. And the same way, Hoffman's great, but Jessica Lange is really, really good as the star-crossed lover that, you know, Julie, the actress that, you know. So there's a lot to love, and the legacy of the movie is that it's 40 years later, it's still kicking, it's still alive on lists, it's still on the cusp. And actually, I think it handles a lot of the stuff we're dealing with in a modern day pretty remarkably well.
Yeah, I mean,
considering 82 is a mess. The 80s are where we're at.
Nowadays, there's much more awareness about people who don't feel comfortable in their bodies and, you know, as the sex they were born with, and how they express and present themselves to the world. And I think, you know, this kind of falls into that category where some people knee jerkily will say, oh, well, you couldn't make Tootsie today. And to that I say, I'm not so sure. I think there are ways you could do this movie as long as you're still being empathetic with these characters and tell a similar story to what we get in this movie.
Well, and everybody gets a moment, and everybody gets a chance to kind of be who they are.
Because what was the last major cross-dressing movie we saw? White Chicks, maybe? I can't think of anything like more recent than that kind of did something, and White Chicks was yikes bad.
Well, White Chicks was yikes bad. It had nothing to do with the gender bending.
No, it just was badly written. And
just, you know, it's a weigh-ins. It's a weigh-ins movie. Yeah. I mean,
some of their early stuff was good, but, you know, and the weigh-ins, I mean, we could probably do a whole 6-episode season on weigh-ins movies and break that stuff down, talk about, you know, going all the way back to In Living Color, and then things like I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, which I still think is a wonderful black exploitation parody.
So recently you have, I mean, not necessarily comedies, but you have, you know, Hedwig and an Angry Inch. That was after White Chicks. You know, a little bit more serious, a lot more serious now. You know what I mean? Kinky Boots.
which is a charming comedy, but I think that embraces, and it's been years since I've seen Kinky Boots, but that embraces the fact that these are some of these characters are LGBTQ, and here we're dealing with straight people who are having to cross dress for reasons, and can you do that anymore? I would hope yes, because again, it's about the empathy. It's about maybe finding the ability to be more understanding and more open
Yeah,
to other people's experiences.
Yeah, and I it's one of those things where I don't like it hasn't been it hasn't been a fruitful, where they haven't come across something where, and again, maybe the empathy is the key, and again, this also might be an area where the legacy is that because it's a serious take that happens to be a funny movie, maybe part of it is the serious movies have kind of overtaken the comedy of the situation. So a good thing. Now, um, before we end for the night, we do have to discuss where we're headed in 2023 and our
Yes.
first kind of big decision of 2023. So we did ask for, we did a poll, and we didn't get a lot of response, which is okay. And so Rich and I are kind of going on out on our own. We're going to do Bond for the first 6 weeks of 2023, starting with next week. And we're going to do them in order. So we're going to do Connery, Lazenby, Moore, Dalton, Brosnan, Craig. Perfect. So we're going to pick one movie from each of their prospective Bonds. Hopefully you'll enjoy this little soiree into Bond that we're calling Bond Fest. I have a sign.
Yeah, this is
boom. There they are.
Yep, this is our second season, basically. This is tonight's our season 1 finale.
Yeah, these are our season. It's the end of the year. It's the end of the season. Yeah. So, but we're gonna do all the Bondies, and try to pick out now. So, Rich and I were discussing it. When you're talking about doing Bond, you're always talking about doing for Connery Bonds. The big ones are always for whatever reason, but mainly because they're amazing. The Goldfinger, Thunderball, and some of the other Connery Bonds kind of get short shrift. We've made a command decision that is going to be, I think, fun for everybody, because we're going to get to go back and go right to the very beginning of the frame of the period, and we're going to do Dr. No. So it's first Bond villain, first Bond girl, first Bond everything. And Rich and I are going to go into detail and take a look at how and why a Scottish guy became the world's biggest British secret agent. And that's next week on Generation Movies. So Dr. No is the pick. We will. So here's the thing. Dr. No is the pick. We know that George Lazenby has one. So that will be week 2. Will definitely be on Her Majesty's Secret Service. We will hope to get some polls up in the next couple weeks, probably next week, for Moore, and then for Dalton, and then Brosnan. And we'll go from there. And Craig, because Craig is relevant, and we're getting closer to 2023. Hopefully 2023 starts off with us doing 6 Bond movies, and 2023 ends with a new Bond being picked for Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's our way to kind of tie into something relevant and something fun. But that is the first movie where we will be doing starting 2023. Rich, where can people find you and all of your amazing writing, and also your cool views on things?
Well, first of all, as like I said, this is kind of our finale for our first season, where of this examination of the films of 1982. Want to thank all of the folks who have watched and thrown comments in. Some folks who have helped with my research over time. A couple of folks who have written books that are fantastic. that canon, the complete canon guide that I held up a couple of weeks ago was a great resource, and just a great book if you're into movies from the 80s. It's going to be a 3-volume thing ultimately, so I would say go out and get the first 2 and sit around and twiddle your thumbs till the 3rd one comes. I don't know. But
do people twiddle their thumbs anymore? Don't they have like stress balls and stuff?
I don't know.
Fidget spinners.
We had some system downtime the other day at work, and I was
Jesus.
Yeah. Anyways, you can find all of my writing at filmbuffonline.com, including, hopefully in the next day or two, my best of the year of 2022 list. I am not a big fan of doing best of the year lists, and I don't rank them when I do them. I'm giving you 10 of the best movies, and I'm putting them in alphabetical order, because at that point, I don't want to be putting them up in competition with each other.
Also, the drama of trying to figure out which Rich actually had in the order that he had them is also fun. I also like anticipated movies. Like, I think 2023 has a lot of stuff we're going to be talking about for years to come. So
that, if I can get to it, is going to be another article that's going to go up in a couple of days.
Wait a second. This comment just went up, Rich. I know you're in the middle of your thing.
Okay.
Joe Ridgely, still haven't seen a full Bond flick.
Dude, we are going to fix that this coming year.
Joe, we're going to give you at least 6 where you're going to like sit back and go, this is pretty indicative of what the franchise did with the particular Bond and whatever their time frame was.
Mm-hmm.
Is the best way I can put that, because they're all kind of indicative of their time period, but they're also all kind of indicative of the actor that plays Bond. So not having seen a full Bond film is not necessarily a prerequisite to not take part in Bond Fest.
True. You can hear my other podcast called The Big Picture Podcast by going to bigpicturepod.com and finding the links to episodes there. Or you can go to iTunes and all the other usual suspects to find that. That is a show I do with my good friend Natasha Bogutsky.
It's really cool. There's two sides of the coin. She's a little bit younger than we are, so she's got really great takes on stuff that we might hold dear. She definitely can skewer some of our stupidity.
Yes, what I love about these conversations, besides just me and a friend, my best friend hanging out in my apartment for like 2 hours every couple of weeks and talking, is we come at things from different perspectives, and not just age and sex, but for other reasons, and where we find common ground and where we don't, I think is always when we have the most interesting discussions. And hopefully that's every week, every episode. And I can be found on Twitter at FilmBuffRich. And as a member of the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle, we just dropped our Best of the Year voting about 2 weeks, week and a half ago. So if you go to at Phila FCC, PHILA FCC, you can find on Twitter, you can find all of the results there.
Good list, solid list.
Great list. Not everything that won was something I voted for, but
you can understand why I got voted for.
But I understand, and I'm not mad about anything. Really.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting year awards wise. I think I think there's going to be a lot of things movies people are pulling for, but also movies that when they win, they aren't necessarily going to be off-put to the general public. I think we might have a real fun year.
I don't see a lot of people looking at some of the awards contenders this year going, "Are you kidding me?" Even a movie like Maverick, which I thought was fine, but I understand why a lot of people loved it. I can say
it goes into the general best sequel of all time discussion, but not necessarily my best sequel of all time discussion. Is how I would put it, because I don't know that I was as big this is a sad thing to say, but I don't know that I was as big a fan of Top Gun as I was of other movies of the '80s. So it's just if you ask me best sequels, I'm always, I tend to be leaning towards Aliens. I tend to be leaning towards Superman 2. I tend to be leaning towards Lethal Weapon 2. Like these are, you know what I mean?
Interesting
Like,
choice.
oh, Lethal Weapon 2 is fantastic.
Mhm.
Well, did you get everything?
Yeah.
Okay. You have so many places. Anyway, so I'm on Twitter, the movie guy, JW the movie guy. Also on Facebook, JW the movie guy. Also on Facebook with Loud Nerdy, which is my other podcast that airs usually on Wednesday nights at 8. Haven't for the last couple of weeks because we've been sick and just trying to get everything in. We're also visiting family this week, so holiday week, chalk it up. But you can also find me. We have a great group there of 700 people that are just very fun, very like-minded. But also you find out like different things. I drop poster reveals. I drop different trailers and all kinds of stuff there. But you can find us there. We will see everybody next week for the start of Bond Fest 2023, the official start of season 2 of Generation Movie. I want to thank everybody that's involved with the Indie Escape Network, including Joe Ridgely for recruiting me and taking the idea of working with Rich and kind of like allowing us to do this on Wednesday night. We appreciate him. I want to thank everybody involved.
Joe does some great graphics for us, so we very much love you for that.
He's a recruiter. He's a recruiter, though. Look, Rich sounds like another show we love on TIAN. Yeah, with smiley face. He's a recruiter. He's a people person. He's doing things. But I want to thank everybody involved with the Indie Escape Network and all the great co-hosts we've dealt with, CJ and Gabe, and Tim Melican and Brandon. All of those folks have made it really easy. And the folks from the Alaska show as well. I want to thank everybody involved. Thank you for joining us tonight.
I know. Like, we pimped our video playlist on the Indie Escape Network YouTube channel, but everybody's show has their own individual playlist. Go check them all out.
Yeah, the CJ show is really great about mental health and finding movies as a way to make your mental health better. And Brandon's show is a wonderful look inside the indie world where you're dealing with indie filmmakers, people who've been working really hard in the business. So thank you for joining us. Have a great night. Have a great holiday. Have a happy new year. Make a resolution. See a movie. Enjoy everything. We appreciate you. Have a great night. Thank you, Rich. Good night.
As always, thank you, sir.